My future husband's brother convinced him I was cheating, shattering our relationship and ruining our wedding. I'm really sorry, but I'm feeling pretty worn out and emotional tonight. Please excuse any mistakes I might make. Tomorrow is supposed to be our wedding day, and we've been engaged for about a year now. Earlier today, my fiancé Robert and I went to the ER because his brother Nigel called us last minute with some serious concerns. While they discussed what was going on, I stood off to the side. Nigel was having a tough time. His heart was racing, he felt nauseous, he was struggling to breathe, and he said it felt like he was dying. He was trembling constantly. The doctor told him it was just a panic attack, but Nigel wasn't buying it. He insisted on getting an MRI and a sleep study because he's been having trouble sleeping. He's convinced there's something really wrong with him and that it can't just be a panic attack. He even told us he couldn't make it to the wedding and wouldn't be able to be Robert's best man. He said, "I know this means a lot to you guys, but it's okay for me to miss it. Your wedding is more important than my health." It really hit me because I just wish he could be there for Robert. They've been through so much together, and it's just really unfortunate that all this is happening right before our big day. I wasn't trying to say that my health is more important than the wedding. I just wanted to support Robert. After a while, I stepped out to use the bathroom and ended up waiting outside since Robert was wrapping things up with Nigel, who was getting admitted. Then, the kicker hit. Robert suggested we postpone the wedding. He said Nigel had begged to be there and reminded me of how much they've been through together. When Robert was in high school, he lived alone while Nigel went off to college. Their parents divorced and there was a lot of manipulation involved, which made their bond even stronger. Robert believes our wedding should be a special moment, but right now he's so worried about Nigel and stressed out. I did my best to calmly explain that tomorrow is our wedding, and we have everything lined up. The venue is booked, the honeymoon flight is for the day after the wedding, and the catering and photographers are all set. He was pleading with me to understand his perspective. After that, I got dropped off at the hotel suite where my friends and I were hanging out before the wedding. I didn't say much to him. I just felt overwhelmed. The thing is, this isn't the first time something like this has happened with Nigel. He's had constant anxiety and panic attacks and has struggled with depression. Every time he insists there's something physically wrong, thinking he must have some kind of tumor or other serious condition, even when doctors say otherwise. Nigel keeps saying he's working on it, but he only seems to focus on finding a physical explanation for his mental health issues. I can recall a few times when we had to cancel plans because of him, like that Halloween day when I had been planning things for 2 months. It's been a rough day. Nigel has been dealing with constant anxiety attacks, which has led Robert to forget about our plans and essentially be at Nigel's beck and call. Early in our relationship, I asked Robert to just let me know when he'd be home or if he'd be late because it triggers my own anxiety due to PTSD. There was this one time he didn't text me for 3 hours, and I ended up having a panic attack because I was worried sick. All I needed was a quick text saying he'd be late. Instead, he left me to deal with my panic attack while he comforted Nigel. I have emotional support cats, and when Robert asked if I could take them to Nigel's apartment, since we live in the same complex, I had to refuse. I told him those cats are my emotional support, and while he claimed they were also his, I reminded him we got them primarily for me. I even mentioned that some of my meds, like Advil for pain and melatonin for insomnia, were getting taken away to help Nigel. I really need those. Robert countered that since we're in a relationship, everything should be shared and he should have a say in whether the cats go to Nigel or not. I made it clear that I've had to give up a lot of my things in the past to help my younger cousins and a cousin with autism, and I didn't want Nigel thinking he could just take whatever he needs. This whole situation felt so triggering for me, and I could barely get my words out through the tears. Every time I tried to explain how I felt, Robert kept pushing for more details. It was overwhelming. I suggested a compromise. Maybe we could arrange for occasional short visits for the cats, like 10 or 20 minutes, but he shot that down immediately. Then he brought up how things would work if we had kids, which felt totally out of line during our anniversary celebration. Nigel kept trying to make plans, despite us having already said we were going away. He insisted he'd already bought tickets or made arrangements. This isn't the first time something like this has happened. Dates have been canceled or postponed because Nigel convinced Robert that the roads were dangerous, only for them to go shopping or drive around anyway. Eventually, Robert apologized and started setting some boundaries. He said no more last-minute plans with Nigel. He needs to rely on a therapist for his anxiety and shouldn't expect Robert to drop everything for him. But the thing is, Nigel still calls Robert 10 times a day. One time, he even called while we were in the middle of having sex. Robert obviously didn't pick up, which made Nigel furious. He started knocking on our door aggressively and lectured us about staying up all night. There are rare occasions when we get to sleep in on our days off, and after a long gaming night, we just wanted to relax. Right now, my extended family and immediate family are weighing heavily on my mind. 2. We have family coming in from all over Florida, Canada, the Philippines, California, Philadelphia, and New York. Unfortunately, they can't stay long because it's so expensive, and they're heading back the day after the wedding. The venue and reception were generously covered by a wealthy close friend of ours, along with the food and the 5-star hotel everyone is staying at, plus the photographers. If we decide to postpone, everything will be canceled, and we won't get any of that money back. And to top it off, our honeymoon, which was a gift from another good friend, is also at risk of being canceled. I'm honestly feeling lost about what to do. Aside from all this chaos with Nigel, things between Robert and me are generally healthy. He really tries to be creative with our date activities, especially when it's his turn to plan. He takes care of me during my low moments and helps lift me back up. My close friends all agree that he's an amazing guy, but the tension ramps up whenever Nigel is involved. Tonight, I'm just in tears, and my friends are doing their best to cheer me up. Even my guy friends, who are like family to me, have stepped in as flower boys to make sure I don't cry too much. I'm really grateful for their support, but I'm also feeling overwhelmed and unsure about how to handle this situation. Should I confront Nigel? Talk to Robert again? I have some boundaries that I've been trying to maintain. Keep the plans we've made unless there's a real emergency, and just let me know what time he'll be home. It doesn't matter if Robert wants to stay out longer. I just need him to give me a heads up. I understand it can be tough for him to juggle everything, but I've been trying to find a compromise. I even suggested having Nigel attend virtually or planning a smaller wedding when we return from our honeymoon. But every time I bring up these ideas, Robert just refuses and insists we postpone instead. For now, we've decided to put the wedding on hold. My friends are going door to door to explain that there's been an emergency. We originally thought about canceling the vendors, but then we decided it would be better to just have a party instead. My friend who covered the costs said she didn't mind. You'd be surprised at how much she spent without a second thought, but it still feels really disrespectful to postpone everything, especially since we have the honeymoon planned. My friend group, which includes 8 of us, is scrambling to get last-minute plane tickets and renting out an Airbnb villa for 2 weeks. This has led to even more issues that I'm trying to sort out, like Robert's reluctance to let me go on this vacation. So, here's the update. My fiancé, who's 25, wants to postpone our wedding just a day before it for his brother, who's 36. I wanted to share this final update to answer any questions and get some closure on the situation. Thank you all for your advice and kind words. I really want you to know that I read through most of the messages, and I appreciate all the concerns you raised. Your support has been incredibly helpful during this tough time, and it has given me a chance to reflect on what is and isn't acceptable in a relationship. So, here's what happened next. We got married, and that night around 2 a.m., my fiancé called wanting to talk. After some back and forth and consulting with my friends, we agreed to have a discussion, but one of my friends needed to be there with us for support. I didn't mean to, but all my pent-up emotions just exploded. I ended up raising my voice and throwing out some hurtful insults like, "You're an ass. You and your brother might as well be in an incestuous relationship. If you don't want to marry me, just say so." He took it all in silence, but the incest comment really struck a nerve. I'm still torn about whether I should apologize for that. I truly felt it in the moment, but I realize I could have expressed myself better. I wrapped up my rant by saying, "If you're not showing up tomorrow, you can just give this ring to your brother." To my surprise, he apologized immediately and promised he'd be there for the wedding. After that, he went off to reflect on everything alone. He told me he realized that he had only reacted the way he did because of the pressure from his brother. Apparently, Nigel said more than just, Can you postpone the wedding? I really want to be there. According to Robert, his brother opened up about how much he was struggling, feeling lonely, and missing the good old days. He felt it didn't make sense to change things since they were family. While Robert wanted some time for himself, Nigel kept bombarding him with calls and texts. I saw some snippets of those texts, and they were intense. I'm feeling worse and worse. The doctors are making me wait for the MRI. I need you, please. Nickname. We used to be so close, and you'd always answer my calls. If name doesn't want you to talk to me, that's wrong. Answer your phone. There were a staggering 37 missed calls. Robert insisted he didn't want to postpone the wedding and was genuinely looking forward to it. In the weeks leading up to the wedding, his friends mentioned how Robert wouldn't stop bragging about the preparations, so I believed him when he said he was excited. He wanted time to think without anyone breathing down his neck or backseat gaming his life. He also apologized for not communicating that better, explaining that he just felt overwhelmed. I shared with him everything that had happened in the past, and we tried to navigate this complicated situation together. The situation with the cats and my medication, along with all the canceled plans and constant calls, has really taken a toll on me. It has been disruptive, even affecting my sleep. The banging on the door and everything becoming about his brother made it feel impossible for me to focus on anything for myself. Robert apologized and shared his side, explaining that he's been trying to improve by not canceling plans, stopping the pestering about taking my emotional support cats, and avoiding last-minute planning. I do recognize that he has been doing better in those areas. He didn't cancel plans for a whole year and generally tried to be more considerate. However, the constant calls and knocking were still overwhelming to the point that it would wake me up and scare me whenever someone banged on the door. He mentioned that he had tried to set boundaries multiple times, starting with boundary number 1. No more spam calls. He told Nigel to call once or twice and leave a message if he didn't hear back from him for a few days. Robert explained that if he's busy, he'll get back to him when he can. If Nigel wanted to make plans, like going skiing, he could just send a Discord message, and Robert would usually respond. The reason for all those constant calls and texts, which I hadn't mentioned before, is that Nigel often asks for help with things like changing tires, putting up lights, or cooking. He even calls about groceries, like when there's a sale on salmon, and then gets angry if Robert doesn't respond right away. To him, it feels urgent. Nigel even wants to talk about his workday, leading to more spam calls. When it comes to boundary 1, Robert said his brother believes it doesn't make sense not to spam call if he doesn't get an answer right away. Apparently, Nigel thinks that anything important warrants a call, like a grocery sale, and if he needs help, that's also considered urgent. Robert explained that he's tried to establish this boundary multiple times, but Nigel dismisses it. Growing up in the Soviet Union, Nigel's perspective is quite different. He seems to think that knocking and calling whenever was just the norm. He points out that his dad has some outdated beliefs, but luckily, he hasn't pushed those onto me. According to Robert, his brother often argues that if name is telling you to do this, that's just wrong. I have mixed feelings about all of this, which I'll explain later. As for boundary 2, Robert said he wouldn't do last-minute planning anymore because we have set plans throughout our days. When we don't have plans, he just wants to relax and play video games. He's also dealing with work and the financial aspects of our life, as we're currently researching how to buy a duplex together. The issue with respecting this boundary is that Robert doesn't always answer every call, and apparently those calls were often about things that Nigel deemed important. So, moving on to boundary 3, I asked for him to stop knocking on the door altogether. If Robert doesn't answer his phone, it just means he's busy or doesn't want to talk. When someone's taking a nap, the last thing they need is to be disrupted by loud banging. It interrupts whatever I'm doing, whether it's remote work, relaxing, sleeping, or other activities. The reason this boundary wasn't respected ties back to the issues with the first boundary. A major point is that Robert doesn't know how to communicate these changes effectively. I'm trying to build my own life with him, and I have my own priorities. His brother keeps saying he understands, but it honestly feels like he doesn't get it at all. Nigel has this on and off relationship pattern. He's never gotten too serious with anyone, never lived with a significant other, and hasn't tried to build a life with anyone. All he seems to do is work, indulge in his hobbies, and complain that everyone around him is changing. I understand loneliness because I've been there, but it feels like he's not making any effort to improve his situation. I even suggested he get a pet, since they can be amazing companions, but he wasn't interested at all. I've made it clear that I want this to stop, and Robert said he'd discuss it one last time with his brother. During a call, while his brother was still spamming him right in front of me, Robert reiterated the boundaries. Sure enough, we got the same old responses. What if I need help? And other excuses. Finally, Robert snapped and told his brother not to come to our wedding, even if he wanted to, and then blocked him. After that, Robert apologized again, promising that he would be there for the wedding and that he'd go no contact with his brother if necessary. I honestly don't want him to cut ties completely. Family is important. I just want his brother to stop all this nonsense. Despite everything, we went ahead with the wedding, even though we both had very little sleep. Nigel tried to attend, but Robert repeated the same boundaries, and his brother refused to respect them, so he ultimately wasn't present for the ceremony. Now, about how Robert's parents reacted. Let me tell you, I absolutely love my mother-in-law. She's such an inspiration. Despite her divorce and Robert having to run away from home due to his dad's manipulation, she has her life together and is aging gracefully. She renovated her own duplex, doesn't have to pay a mortgage, can vacation on a whim, and has a job that respects and values her. She's not rushing into anything and is truly living her life. When I talked to her about Nigel, her reaction was understanding. She said, "I'll talk to him later, but I understand you don't want him at your wedding. It's your special day, and I'm sorry for how he's been acting." Meanwhile, Robert's father was trying to convince us to let Nigel join us, arguing that he's family. My mother-in-law just rolled her eyes and walked away to go on her date. I'm not very close with Robert's dad, so I didn't feel too affected by that. Despite everything, we have a mutual respect in our relationship. Robert keeps me out of his family's issues, and he treats our cats like they're his grandkids, which I really appreciate. Looking back, I wonder why I didn't see this as an issue sooner or push harder before we got engaged. Honestly, I've struggled to understand what healthy boundaries really are. My relationship with my real dad is complicated. He left when I was young, but I don't hold a grudge against him. He thought it was for the best because he was deep into drugs and alcoholism. He went through rehab multiple times and improved for a while, but it never lasted long. He never treated me harshly while drunk. In fact, he would refuse to be near me when he was under the influence. He taught me compassion and the importance of not judging others. He did his best, but he knew that his best wasn't enough for me. He was a good yet troubled man who struggled to find the right treatment in a third-world country. He had talent. He even got a scholarship to the U.S., played basketball exceptionally well, and qualified for the Olympics in ping pong. But despite these achievements, he often felt lonely. My mother was a different story. She lived vicariously through me, and when I couldn't meet her expectations, she publicly humiliated me. I remember her yanking my hair and threatening to strip me naked and put me out on the streets. She dragged me to work, and when I couldn't sit still, she slapped me hard enough to give me a nosebleed. She would say things like, "I wish I had your brother instead of you. Why can't you make me happy for once?" She never stood up for me when other kids would insult me, saying, "Your mom doesn't love you." It was never a healthy environment. I learned that my worth was tied to whether I was good, which meant avoiding any trouble or conflict. My mom was always busy and never taught me essential life skills, expecting me to learn everything on my own. Over time, I managed to forgive her. She apologized and has tried to let me live my life more freely. When I was 20, she began to change, perhaps because she realized how much she had mirrored her own upbringing. My brother left home as soon as he could, seeking to escape our mom's toxic behavior. He's built a better relationship with her now and has apologized for leaving me to deal with everything on my own. But I don't hold it against him. It was good for him to leave for his own sake. As for me, I've been diagnosed with BPD, which I'm thankfully managing healthily now. I've learned self-soothing techniques to cope with PTSD, depression, and anxiety, all of which I manage through medication, therapy, and dialectical behavior therapy, DBT. Whenever situations arise with Robert, I often feel like I shouldn't be a burden. I think, don't be selfish. It's family, and you shouldn't inconvenience others just because you're feeling this way. You're being unreasonable. It's just your BPD acting up. I never truly understood boundaries until recently. Lately, I've been struggling to voice my thoughts, but my husband has been really supportive in helping me communicate better. It's hard because I feel guilty, like I'm somehow taking him away from his brother. I worry that nothing should change just because my husband is with me, and I fear I'm causing a rift between them. Robert is the one who initially decided to set boundaries, and he explained that he wants those boundaries too. However, he has trouble enforcing them because he feels like he's betraying his brother. It's his brother, after all. I still grapple with what healthy boundaries look like. So if any of you have advice or resources, please send them my way. I really don't want their relationship to deteriorate. It's tough when you can't talk to someone you care about. Nigel has been asking for more examples of why these boundaries should be in place, but we're at a loss for what else to say aside from the fact that Robert has other responsibilities in his life. How can my husband explain this to him in a way that's kind yet firm? Things need to change because I'm trying to build my life with Robert, and I have my own needs too. Nigel doesn't seem to grasp that because he's never settled down with anyone. We joked that if he lived with someone, we should spam call him for every little thing to show him what it's like on the other side. On a side note, we're currently on our honeymoon. Our friends didn't buy or book anything for us, and since I couldn't sleep, I thought I'd give this update and express my gratitude for all the kind words and advice. Just to let you know, the cats are safe with someone we trust in case Nigel tries to get into our apartment while we're away. Now, moving on to the next story. I've been secretly learning my girlfriend's native language to propose, but I stumbled upon something unexpected. I'm throwing this out there because she reads my stuff, so I've changed some details to keep it less obvious. This might be a bit lengthy, and I'm feeling a bit frantic, so bear with me. I've been in total shock for the past few days, and I'm not sure what to think or do. My girlfriend, Grace, is German, and I'm American. We've been dating for 2 years, and everything about her feels perfect. She's incredibly intelligent and beautiful, and we have so much in common. Our relationship has felt almost unreal. About a year ago, I realized she was the one I wanted to spend my life with, so I decided to start learning German to propose to her in her native language. I've been studying for over 6 months now, and I feel like I'm decent at it. I can understand most things. Here's where things took a turn. Grace and I are at this beautiful tropical resort for a vacation before we head back to school and work, and things started off so well. We spent our days chilling, talking, and enjoying each other's company. Honestly, I wanted to be by her side day and night. 2 days ago, we were all having dinner at one of those massive buffet restaurants at the resort. It was a fun atmosphere with conversations happening all around us. My family really likes Grace and knows I'm planning to propose. I felt confident with my German. I could catch the gist of most conversations. Then, out of nowhere, a man I had never seen before approached Grace and said something to her in German. I've replayed that moment in my head every second for the past 2 days, so I know exactly how it went down. He chuckled and asked, "Am I going to see you tonight, Grace? Perhaps if you behave." And then he just walked away. In that instant, I felt completely detached from reality. A wave of emotions hit me all at once. I honestly can't recall what happened right after that. I don't know if Grace explained who he was or if she just brushed it off. I was sitting there, completely dazed, and when I finally came to my senses, I felt like a robot. It was as if I had no control over my emotions, and I honestly felt numb. After about 5 minutes, I excused myself to the bathroom to wash my face, but the numbness remained. I returned to the table, and the night went on as if everything was normal. I acted fine the next day too, but this morning, it all hit me like a ton of bricks, and I broke down in tears in the shower. Maybe I should just ask Grace about the whole situation first, but honestly, there's only one explanation for it, right? Their interaction felt super flirty, and I've never been the kind of guy who gets insecure or overly protective in relationships. So, I truly believe my instincts aren't lying to me about the vibes I picked up. If she did flirt with that guy, it must have been while I was asleep because we were together the entire time I was awake. I feel sick to my stomach just thinking about it. Right now, I'm sitting in the lobby of the resort while she's just a few feet away from me. I've been acting normal even though we had sex yesterday. I know I haven't been handling all these emotions well, but I feel like I'm on the verge of a breakdown. Honestly, I want to jump off a cliff. There's a nice steep one not too far from the beach here. If it weren't for some of my younger family members being with me on this trip, I might have considered it. I've been wanting to bring this up with Grace, but I just can't seem to do it. Every time I see her, my mind goes blank. Maybe she isn't cheating. Maybe there's a reasonable explanation for it. I just wish I could sort through these thoughts. Maybe she explained everything right after that exchange, but I just wasn't really listening. I love this girl, and I wouldn't stay with her if I found out she cheated. The thought of revenge cheating has crossed my mind. It might feel good for a moment, but I really don't know what to do right now. I just can't seem to talk to her about this. Am I going crazy? Am I overthinking everything? Just to recap, I've been learning German to surprise her when I propose, and then I overheard this very suspicious conversation between her and a man I'd never seen before. This made me think she might be cheating. Update 1. I'm 27, and my girlfriend is 25. We've been together for 2 years, and she doesn't know I speak her native language. A lot of people thought my last story was fake, especially since some believed I learned the language too quickly. But it's totally possible to reach a basic conversational level in about 3 months, especially since I'm fluent in another language that shares similarities with German. That made learning it much easier for me, and now it's become a fun hobby that I want to keep improving on. Anyway, my life has taken a complete 180. I was planning to abandon this account, but I'm feeling a bit better about everything, and I hate when others don't provide updates. So here I am. I've struggled with mental health for a large part of my life. I've had suicidal thoughts since I was 5 years old, and my anxiety and depression have only worsened over time. I never told anyone and managed to hide it well, which I realize now was a mistake. Eventually, I think I suppressed a lot of those memories, and those feelings became less frequent. My mental health had been stable for a while before all this happened. While we were still at the resort, I probably should have waited until we got home to address this, but I felt like I couldn't wait. We had only 2 days left at the resort. As some users suggested, I finally asked her about the situation in English, and when I did, she lied. I was planning to switch to German for the conversation, but when I asked her who that guy was, she didn't manage to lie. After about 10 seconds of stuttering, she burst into tears and left the room. Once again, I felt that strange dissociative sensation wash over me. It was like I was a spectator in my own life, having no control over my actions while feeling a whirlwind of emotions and yet feeling completely numb at the same time. About half an hour later, she texted me a long message detailing everything that had happened, and she apologized profusely. I didn't respond right away. Here's the short version of what she said. She went for a nighttime walk one evening because she couldn't sleep while I was asleep. We both do this often, so I found that believable. She ended up, so, here's what happened. Grace came across some event at the resort and ended up meeting some random people who were all drinking. They just so happened to be German, and she decided to join them for some fun. Things escalated, and she ended up going back to that guy's room. It turns out they connected on more than just a physical level. They exchanged numbers and started texting while we were there. She felt terrible about it afterward, but was also really confused. I'm trying to think about this objectively, but it hurts to consider that she might like him that much. I've always stressed that people should prioritize their happiness, and I know he's a handsome guy. I didn't admit it in my last post, but I was way too emotional to think straight after she left. I've never really had a reason to be angry before. Sure, I have a temper, but it usually takes a lot to even irritate me. The feelings and thoughts I had were so horrible that I'm honestly not comfortable sharing them. When I saw Grace the next time, she wanted to talk and apologize in person, but I felt completely drained and didn't have the energy to say anything. I ended up avoiding her for the rest of our time at the resort. I tried my best to steer clear of my family, but they must have sensed something was off because it felt awkward. On the flight back, I sat next to Grace, and it was just strange. At least she respected my need for silence. She kept trying to talk and text me after we landed, but at that point, I didn't want to see or hear from her again. so I blocked her on everything. When I got back, I was acting really impulsively that entire week. My semester was about to start, but I quickly canceled all my classes and decided to take a break. I booked a last-minute vacation to a place I'd always wanted to visit, bought a bunch of random things I didn't need, and even tried some semi-hard drugs that I never imagined I would. I had sex with multiple hookers and got into fights with random guys at bars. Oddly enough, I felt good. I woke up every day feeling like I was on top of the world. But then, about a week after I returned from the resort, I had one of those cliché movie moments. I was in a club bathroom, puking my guts out while that loud heartbeat music was playing. I started laughing at the absurdity of it all and realized how out of control my life had become. That's when I decided to see a therapist who eventually referred me to a psychiatrist. I guess I'm crazy, but I was diagnosed with BPD and bipolar 2. I had never even heard of BPD before. As I read more about BPD, I realized that a lot of the symptoms resonated with struggles I've faced since I was very young. It's clear that my trauma really intensified those symptoms over the years. Right now, I'm still taking this semester off and continuing my treatment, and I'll probably start medication soon. I haven't spoken to Grace since everything happened. She reached out to my sister, but I didn't want to hear what she had to say. I've been kind of avoiding my family and close friends, and I know I should stop that. Through all this, I've learned a lot about myself and come to the realization that I'm not ready for a relationship. This has truly been a wake-up call for me. The anger and sadness have lessened, and I finally feel like myself again. I don't think anything else will happen with Grace, so I won't be active on this account anymore. Thank you all for the advice and support. I'm sorry for not responding to anyone. I just wasn't in a place to talk. But I did read everything, and I really appreciate the messages and DMs.